Quickly, just to update you on the Dow and the Russell. The Dow has this possible double top. It may not be done yet. We still have the trend line right here, possibly back testing, but you've got a possible double top, or again, sometimes the second peak goes higher than the first, something worth paying attention to. If we move back to the trend line in the weekly time frame, pattern may not play out. We might go above that level. There is a possible double top in play. The MACD recently rolled over. Here you can see it on the weekly chart. And again, if we do go higher, then again, we could go slam up into this trend line again, the upper boundary of the channel. And again, then you can have a double top, even going a little bit higher. If we move towards this trend line right here or right here, then we would go above that area. So just that trend line I'm watching again of this channel, we may end up hitting it. If we do, see a Dow theory sell signal between the Dow and the transport, something worth watching. This massive divergence with the 2022 peak there on the Dow, and transports peaked in 2021. They diverged at the time back over here. Do they do it again right here? And I think that's possible. If the Dow comes up here, we could slam and stall right at this trend line and end up reaching that upper channel line or coming near that area. Do we see a divergence between the two? That is often present at tops. We'll be watching for that. Dow may peak before the S&P 500, so do keep that in mind. It often does. Before the bursting of the tech bubble, when the S&P peaked in March of 2000, the Dow peaked before it in late 19. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. If you could take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. Let me know you want this information, that you like this information, you like the charts, by supporting the channel today. The Russell struggling at the 20. If we get a bigger pullback, we could test the trend line, get further consolidation. If we can rally, again, I'm expecting a lower high. We may pull back and then try to get a lower high, but we may just struggle right here surrounding the 20-week moving average. I believe the Russell's already peaked. Here during the topping process, it struggled at the 22. Clear this area. Again, we can get a larger Fibonacci retracement, but the stochastic's trying to roll over here in the weekly time frame in the negative region. So again, there might be more consolidation before going higher, or again, we might just struggle and get a more feeble rebound surrounding the 20-week moving average and just go sideways around it. I still think the S&P goes higher. I don't think we'll make a new high on the Russell. Stochastic rolls over here in the daily time frame. Again, you might get a divergence, or you might get confirmation of a higher low if you test that 200 and trend line again. Again, it might be that we pull back some more, get some more volatility, and then try to go higher. But risk is we take out the trend line in the 200, and the Russell just gets a feeble rebound. After dropping nearly 12.5%, we just get a feeble rebound and still at the cloud, and we're stalling at the 50 period here, along with that 20-week moving average. We're stalling at the 50. That's the green line right here, here in the weekly time frame. The 10 and 20 remain below the 50 as well. So again, we're still struggling here on the Russell, and like I said, I believe the Russell has topped. So again, stochastics rolling over. So again, do we have more volatility coming for the market? If we do, I'll be watching the 200 and the trend line here on the Russell. Now, the market shrugged off the new tariffs that were implemented Monday on steel and aluminum. They shrugged off a hawkish tone and a cautious tone out of Powell, and we managed to squeeze out a gain with the Dow and the S&P. Nasdaq did not. The Dow was up 0.28%, up 123 points. The S&P was up 2 points, pretty much flat. Again, gapping lower and then filling the gap, going sideways, and then ended out squeaking out a gain. The Nasdaq was down 0.36%. The Russell was down just over 0.5%, and the VIX. Let me just move this over here so you can see it. The VIX up 1.33%, just above 16. We had Powell's testimony just quickly. Again, he tried to stay clear, commenting too much on tariffs, but did pretty much say what he said at the last FOMC meeting there and his press conference. No rush to cut, No need to be in a hurry. Well, again, they should be in a hurry because we're about to have a recession. They should be slashing rates right now. They're making the same monetary policy mistake they made in 2007 by not slashing rates with the warning signs in 2007, and they ended up having to do emergency cuts in 2008, as I've said. Back then, they were worried about inflation rather than the recession. Same thing that they're doing right now. They're going to be sorry. Powell, though, kind of interesting. Senator Kennedy, during the Q&A, complimented and praised Powell and the Fed for saving us all from a recession. The Fed was responsible for giving us a soft landing. And Powell, he accepted the compliment. Remember, back at the December meeting, Powell told us that it's clear we've avoided a recession. We have not avoided a recession. It's just Powell and the Fed disregard all of the recession indicators that are flashing, which is telling us that a stock market top is getting ready to happen. We're going to begin to see the stock market price in a recession. Another day of testimony with Powell tomorrow. Before Powell speaks, we'll have the inflation data. Again, we'll get the consumer price index. Both the month-over-month numbers are supposed to be 0.3%. The year-over-year is supposed to be down 2.8 from 2.9. With the headline number, the core year-over-year is supposed to be at 3.1, lower than the 3.2. So we'll be watching to see what happens with that. Again, I'm looking for a bottom. Told you we get this pullback. We have. Again, I'm watching to see if it's done. Just a shallow pullback, or we get more of a pullback, or do we go back down and try to take out that low and then bottom out the low from the tariff sell-off? We're watching closely. We're going to get the PPI wholesale inflation there on Thursday, and then I believe it's retail sales on Friday. So a big day tomorrow, the inflation data. We'll see if the market tries to rally with that or not. If it is cool, the market could rally with that, but then we'll be watching Fed Chair Powell's testimony. And then again, do we hear anything on more tariffs? Supposed to be more tariffs announced later in the week. We'll be watching for that. The market right now shrugging off the tariffs, at least for now, that we got with the steel and aluminum tariffs at 25%. Gold jump higher, even though the market squeaked out a gain, it jumped higher back above the 10 period, moving back towards the 20. Again, watching to see, does this get pushed down to the 200 and the 100 before we get a meaningful bounce, or do we try it right here, right now? We'll be watching. If we do, then we could get a bigger sell-off with the S&P. Still not out of the woods yet with this corrective move, but I believe it will come to a conclusion if it hasn't already. As I've said, pullback that I predicted has happened. I'm looking for clues now. Is it done or not? I'm looking very closely, but we're going to get more tariffs later in the week, and Powell, another day of testimony of Powell, and we're going to get the CPI, which is supposed to be cool. So we'll be watching to see what the 10-year yield does. It dropped below the 50, got back above it. Do we end up trying to rebound now, or end up dropping down to the longer-term moving averages before we get the next attempted rebound? And if so, does this high hold? I'm watching. Do we have a double top that goes back and tests the previous peak, or do we the next rebound, whether lower and then rebound, or whether right now does this peak now hold? We'll be watching that. Eventually, the yields are going to go back down because rates are going to go back down because we're going to have the recession that everybody is saying isn't going to happen, but yet the recession indicators are warning is going to happen. Now, after the tariff sell-off, Bitcoin got a rebound. It went back and it filled the gap with the IBIT ETF. P later followed suit. And now Bitcoin is turning down, and it's what I'm watching, and we have the death cross here, watching to see, do we get a bigger test to the support zone? Here's the January low, bottom the same day the S&P did, and then here's the tariff sell-off. Again, another bottom the same day as the S&P. Does the S&P 500 get a bigger pullback to test that low or not? And Bitcoin still may not be done. I just made a Bitcoin video. If you want to see it, I'll link it at the end of this video. But again, watching to see if divergences develop here on Bitcoin. And I'm looking at the IBIT ETF because it's really mirroring the S&P. So again, we've got the sell-off with Bitcoin and IBIT. Does the S&P follow suit or not? Here's the IBIT ETF. This is the ETF for Bitcoin. And could we see divergences develop here in the more recent price action if we go back and fill this gap right here? This is the gap from the inflation data last month. We're going to get the CPI tomorrow. I'll be watching. The 4-hour we just looked at, it got the death cross. The Bitcoin ETF just got it right here. So I'll be watching. Does this positive correlation continue? Again, we had both the Bitcoin ETF and S&P bottomed on the 13th. They had the December sell-off. They both rallied with the election, ahead of Inauguration Day. We sold off. They both had the DeepSeek sell-off. They both had the bear flag form, but we gapped lower when we had the tariff sell-off right here. We went back and filled the gap, and then we've been, pulling back further to test that low ever since. So as what I'm watching, does the S&P pull back and get a bigger pullback to test the tariff sell-off low? That's what I'm watching. I think Bitcoin's likely going to bottom soon, but does the S&P follow suit, end up getting a bigger sell-off or not? Or do we have a short-term decoupling where the positive correlation goes away? But they have had a positive correlation, the bull flag patterns, the rising wedge, the rally with Inauguration Day, the pullback here to back test. So we'll be watching closely to see what happens. Look at the 60-minute chart. It looks very similar except for the price action right here. Went up, we filled the gap immediately here with the IBET ETF and then pulled back. The S&P went up and filled the gap, went higher, and then had a shallow pullback. So there's been a little bit of a discrepancy here. So I'll be watching these tariff sell-off lows. Do we take them out, this week or not? Or do we get higher lows above those levels? And again, does the S&P just get more of a shallow pullback? You don't have to like Bitcoin. I'm just showing you this because, again, the correlation between them has been very, very positive up until right now. We have kind of a short-term decoupling between. Now here's the 60-minute chart. Very, very similar, but we've had a deeper retracement with the Bitcoin ETF. We have not had a deeper retracement with the S&P 500. So again, they do have a positive correlation, but maybe there is a short-term decoupling that is taking place. We'll be watching. See if S&P is just lagging once again. If it's just lagging, we still get the bigger correction. So here, again, we had the DeepSeek sell-off here, the rebound to fill the gap. We formed a bear flag. I talked about that, and we broke down. We had the tariff sell-off. Tariffs were paused. We saw the rally back up. We had the rising wedge, and then the rising wedge broke down. We got a gap higher here, and now we're just kind of trading up here, either getting a throwback maybe or just a shallow pullback here. Again, I'm watching to see if we come back and move closer to the tariff sell-off lows. Bitcoin has. Bitcoin ETF has. The S&P has not. So again, got to be watching that. Do we go back and maybe try to test this trend line again or not, and maybe hit the 61 point of Fibonacci, or is it over? Is that it? And again, I predicted that we get a pullback, but it could be done with an A, B, C move right here, but that could be invalidated, and we could have a more complex corrective move that could still have more work to be done down in here, or even sell off with the tariffs that are supposed to be announced later in the week. Again, we could still come back and end up filling the CPI gap or hitting our 78.6 Fibonacci, which is just above it at 58.49, not seen on this chart. So just some things. And with that, if that happens, you can still form a larger bullish divergence right here. We did have one right here. Do we get another one? Again, it was some multiple point divergences over here that tipped us off to the January bottom, and as we move towards that trend line. And if we move back down, we could hit that trend line from 2023 yet again. Still possible. Looking for clues. I told you again, I expected the pullback. I tell you exactly what I think. I told you again on the January 9th and 10th, I thought we bottomed that next week. We did. We bottomed the very next day on the Monday the 13th. And I told you, fill the gap from the election and bottom at that trend line. That's exactly what happened. I told you I thought we'd rally. Over here, I told you I thought we'd pull back at some point and back test this trend line. That happened. Told you when we got the rally here, the sell-off with DeepSeek, that I told you I still thought we'd move to a new low. That happened. But here, told you I am not sure, and I always like to tell you exactly what I think. I don't know. I don't know if we get a shallow pullback or a deeper pullback that still gives us a higher low here, or if we come back and try to take this low out and get a deeper retracement, a deeper test as Bitcoin has done. They do have a positive correlation, but right now there seems to be a short-term decoupling. We'll be watching. Now, there's going to be a lot more for the market to digest this week, so we'll be watching to see, do we get another push down? And I've marked here, I put a question mark here. I was certain about the rally here. I was certain about the pullback here. I was certain about this low being taken out with our bear flag. I'm not so sure that this low is going to be taken out. It still could, but again, it's a question mark in my mind, and so I just want to make that perfectly clear. When I'm uncertain about something, I like to make that very clear to you. The correction could be over with the pullback here with a possible ABC, though it could still be under construction. It could be. Don't want to rule that out. We continue to have this trend line right here acting as resistance right here, and we have support down here at the 200 and the 50. We're still holding above it. If we start losing the 50, losing the 200, we can get the bigger sell-off there, taking out this low. We still may get a sell-off and get a higher low. So just some things to be aware of. The question now is subwave 2 done? If we have now begun wave 1 and 2, the next wave should be 3 if it's done. If there's more work to be done, then again, a little bit more of volatility before another big push higher to new all-time highs. But I think the time is short. We're going to see an inflation freak out eventually. Now, this inflation report might come in tame, as it's expected to do. Going forward, we know that inflation is likely going to increase. Had a massive, about a 2.2 trillion in deficit spending in 2024, and the Fed policies are increasing the money supply. So we know inflation is going to rise. M2 rose to just under 4% on a year-over-year basis. So again, the CPI will eventually follow that in all likelihood in the not-too-distant future. Not going to be tariffs that raise inflation. It's going to be those things. That's what causes inflation. So the question now, is this just a throwback or, towards the breakdown of a rising wedge and we end up going lower? Or is this, just a mild pullback? And this is just coming to now a conclusion, and we're going to start seeing everything begin to turn bullish and go higher. So we're going to be watching to see how this unfolds. This is a 60-minute chart again of the S&P, and again, that larger Fibonacci retracement. And again, I don't know that we do. Again, it's a question mark in my mind, and I want to make that clear. I'm not certain. I was certain a pullback to back test. I was certain that we were going to take out that low. Here, I'm not so certain. So just to be clear about that, the 61-point of Fibonacci is at 59.09. Could come back and test this trend line again. If we do, we'll hit that rising trend line from 2023 again, or a little bit deeper and reach it. If we try to fill the CPI gap here, hit the 78.6 Fibonacci at 58.49. So just some Fibonacci levels I'm looking at. Far the 50% retracement has we moved just beyond that. We didn't reach the 61-point of Fibonacci, which is really at the gap support area. Now, again, if we do get a deeper retracement, and I'm not so sure that we will, if we do, then this trend line comes into play right here from the 2023 low. That's where we bounced off of at the January low. Now, again, if we do end up getting a bigger pullback, we got your 100 period moving average there right at the trend line. Again, we end up going a little bit lower. You got that gap fill with the CPI here. I don't know that we fill that gap, but again, we're looking at this trend line very closely, looking at the 100 period moving average. Bitcoin's taking it out right now and trying to bounce off of it. See that in my latest Bitcoin video. I'll link it at the end of this video. But again, do we now have this bottom where we, have had this pullback and it's done and we just keep going? And again, moving towards this trend line, and we maybe rally with the CPI and shrug off the news with the tariffs, whatever. Or do we pull back a little bit more and then go, we'll be watching that, or get something more dramatic and then go, we'll be watching this trend line closely in our 100 period moving average. Again, I believe that we're in minor wave 5. I believe minor wave 4 completed over here. Everybody was telling us, oh, no, we have the head and shoulders, and we're gonna go a whole lot lower. And the herd got really, some of them got bearish there. I told you we were bottoming out, and that's why I told you the following week, after January 9th and 10th, that we'd be bottoming that week, that next week, and that was correct. And that was the last time we had the inflation data. Do we bottom again here? Continue onward and upward? We'll be watching. One thing, if we do pull back and end up getting a higher low right here, you do have the possibility, of a triangle developing here. That's certainly possible. The triangle wouldn't be wave 2, but it would be part of wave 2 and part of wave 3 combined. So just pointing that out, because you don't see triangles in wave 2s, but if you put them together, it might develop that, and that's one point. If we get a higher low, we might have already started the wave 3, and then just boom, if we just pull back and get a higher low above this level, which still may give us a deeper pullback. Something worth pondering and watching. Looking at the MACD, it's just kind of going sideways here. It's in positive territory. RSI is just hovering right above 50 there. So again, we're going to be watching, is there more consolidation, more work to be done, or is it done? And here we go. To get the 20 back above the 50, I do believe we're going up here. Question is the pullback done? And that's the question mark in my mind right now. Do we get a deeper pullback? This thing may be done and it's off to the races. We'll be watching how this all unfolds. But like I said, we are going higher, in my opinion. The pullback that I predicted has happened, and it may very well be done. Candlesticks are giving us a mixed message in the daily time frame. We had the bearish hanging man right here, and that got confirmed. We had the red bar that closed below that level. That got confirmed, but then the very next day we got a bullish inside day forming a bullish harami. That has not been confirmed. So again, is this just a throwback, or trying to backtest, or getting a throwback towards the breakdown of the rising wedge, or do we have a bullish inside day that will eventually be confirmed? Today we did not confirm it. We were pretty much flat. We sold off and then we rebounded and we closed flat. If we get the bigger retracement, again, I'll be looking at these Fibonacci's. But again, the hangman, we've gotten confirmation, but there's been no follow through. We got to take out this low to get a follow through. There's been no follow through. Do we get it right here and now? Or again, later in the week with the tariffs, we'll see what happens. We're going to get the CPI. You try to rally with that, or is there appointment with it, or does the market shrug it off and focus on tariffs or Powell or something? We'll be watching to see how all this unfolds. But right now, you've got a mixed message with the candlesticks. Follow through for the hanging man. No confirmation or follow through with the bullish inside day. We'll be watching the candlesticks closely. Again, I'm watching the VWAP support levels here and horizontal support levels should we get a bigger sell-off. But like I said, let me be clear. It's very possible the bottom is in here, as I've said, but will the S&P play catch-up to Bitcoin and end up getting another sell-off? We'll be watching. Now, while we had that bearish hanging man candlestick, I told you that's the day that momentum flipped back to bullish. It's still bullish. You got the 20 now above the 50, the 10's above it. So again, did we just get a mild pullback and we're going to try to resume the advance if we can clear the lower high that's set up right here, form the bear flag with the deep seek sell-off, or the peak right here surrounding inauguration day. We're just kind of getting some choppiness here. So again, I'll be watching to see, is there more work to be done? And again, there is. I'll be watching the Fibonacci levels closely. We get something really ugly, I'll be watching the gap fill at 58.43. The momentum remains bullish. The bar reflecting momentum, though, is turning back to red right here. And again, we're seeing it go back and forth from red to blue, really just showing the sideways price action. So again, if we start losing the 10, we're resting on it right now. If we start losing the 10 and 20, dropping back below the 50, then again, we'll see what happens. And a test of this low would be in play for a higher low or lower low. If we can hold above the 20 period and the 10, we get traction up with the CPI. We got to clear this overhead resistance for the advance to resume. Green bar with the awesome oscillator, which remains in positive territory. Nasdaq, again, momentum still bullish at this point, but it could just be we're going sideways, as you can clearly see. I mean, we're just, turning sideways here. We have now been able to move above the December high. We got a topping tail in December on the monthly chart, so we're watching, do we end up selling off here? If we do, I'm watching the gap down over here, and if we take that out, that's at the 20,700 area. If we take it out, then you have the gap from the election, which was never filled, at 20,227. So far, we're stalling at this gap fill area, the red dots of resistance. We're stalling here. If we lose the 10 and 20 period and drop below the 50, then you can see a bigger sell-off. Remember, Nasdaq got a higher low with the tariff sell-off. It didn't take out the deep-seek low. The S&P did. So there is a divergence between the two. But could we be forming a triangle on Nasdaq? That's certainly possible. Something I'm watching here. Is that under construction? Just something worth paying attention to. If we come back down, but we don't take out these lows, you get another higher low. Something worth paying attention to. And Nasdaq 60-minute chart is stalling right at this trend line right here. And again, that could be, again, a possible triangle. So something worth paying attention to. I didn't draw that very straight, but something worth paying attention to. If Nasdaq ends up coming back and taking out the lows from DeepSeek and from the tariff sell-off, again, the gap fill here, 20,759, and the gap fill here from the election then come into play. Again, right now, there was no bullish divergence. We got the higher low at the tariff sell-off. Still may end up seeing one develop. We'll be watching these gaps. If we do get a bigger sell-off, if we're going to try to rally, you got to clear this area and then be able to move above the resistance zone, the peak here and the top over here from December. You got to be able to move above the January high and the December high, which is the resistance zone if we clear this trend line. We'll be watching what happens with the CPI data. Rally with it. Is there disappointment? The market focusing on something else. Is it positive and comes in cooler, but does the market focus on tariffs and Powell or some other catalyst we'll be watching? Again, I've drawn these trend lines right here. So far, they're holding the low here in January connected to the August low. I've drawn a channel with that. Should we move to new highs? Here, we've had the bull flag. We've pushed back into the trading range. If we pull back, you have this trend line, you have the cloud, you have your 100 period moving average. You start taking these levels out. You're taking out the horizontal support level from July. You take these levels out in the 100 period moving average. Again, you've got that gap fill from the election down here. The gap fill that I talked about with the CPI gap right here, that is right here at horizontal support. So it's another area to watch should we end up breaking this trend line. But right now the trend line's holding. We're holding above the moving averages. That's positive. Will we get a CPI rally and mark the pullback as done? And if so, do we try to move above that December high and invalidate the monthly reversal candlestick that we got, that topping tail in the monthly time frame that I've talked about?